Well, hello. Pastor Vince with Clergy in Support of the Second Amendment again. And today I want to talk to you about what else? The Senate bill. But I want to talk about it in a little bit different way. It looks like it's going to pass, and no, I'm not happy about it. But does that mean we failed? Does that mean that all of your efforts, all of your phone calls, all of your emails, all of your snail mails, whatever you did, that all of that was worthless? Or to put it another way, if the bill passes as is, were all of our efforts for nothing? And I want to say absolutely not. Absolutely not. Your efforts did a lot of good. And that's what I want to talk about today. Let me be clear, I'm opposed to this bill. If you can do anything to stop it, you should do so. If you haven't done so, get on the phone, get on the email, and let your senators know. Whether their senators are opposed or in favor, let them know. They talk to each other. This bill could yet be stopped, but it looks like it probably won't. So, what does that mean? Well, I think the first thing we should consider is what have we been up against? What have we been up against? Well, we are up against the most anti-gun president in my lifetime. And as you can see from my beard, I've been around a while. Never seen a president worse than him. We've got anti-gun majorities in both houses. And as we found out, that includes some rhinos in the Senate. And sadly, we've had multiple mass shootings. We all know these things tend to happen in bunches. And we've had several. And they've been tragic, they've been horrible. And that always results in a push to do something. Support for gun control always goes up. Now there's some good news. Support isn't what it used to be when these things happen. People are wising up. But our opponents are always looking for some new approach. And that's what they've done here. So let's take a look at this bill. Remembering that there are things in this bill that we wanted. There's money to secure schools. There's money for mental health. I'm not going to talk about that. But let's not forget it's in there. It's in there because we wanted it. If we didn't want it, they wouldn't have put it there. So that's a victory in a way. But that doesn't mean the rest of the bill's great. Let's look at it. Let's take a hard look at it. What did our opponents want in the red flag law department? Well, they wanted federally mandated red flag laws. They wanted to require every single state to pass a red flag law. No exceptions. Every territory, every tribe, everybody would have had to have had a red flag law. They wanted the funds that were allocated for red flag laws to be used exclusively for red flag laws. And they wanted as little due process as possible. They certainly didn't want anything in the bill that would require due process. And they certainly didn't want anything in the bill that talked about penalties for fraud and abuse of the red flag law. Even though they know that fraud and abuse is massive in the 19 states that have red flag laws. So, how many of those things did they get? Answer, not a single one. What did they get? Not much. They got money that can optionally be used for red flag laws if the red flag laws meet the federal requirements. Which means they have to have considerably greater due process protections than most red flag laws have now. Now, am I unaware that there's a whole argument that red flag laws violate due process? No, I'm not. And I'm sympathetic to that argument, but the courts have ruled repeatedly that ex parte hearings, as are done with red flag laws, are constitutional. Do I think they should be? No. Does that change anything? No. So, they have to have increased due process protections, including, by the way, that the statements have to meet evidentiary standards, the normal standards, and they have to be given under penalty of perjury. That's something, my friends, we can work with in terms of supporting people who've been falsely accused. Then there's the fact that this law requires, if you're going to have federal funds for your red flag law, there has to be specific penalties for abuse and fraud. Now, many states, including my former state of California, where I spent the majority of my life, have red flag laws that won't meet these requirements. They're going to have to change them and eliminate a lot of their provisions in order to comply with this law. That is a good thing. Would I like to get rid of them entirely? Absolutely. But I'll take scaling them back. That's a good thing. And it's going to be interesting to see what the 19 states that have these laws do, because very few, if any of them, meet these requirements. Now, what else can we do? Well, thankfully, there's no requirement that the money be spent on red flag laws. That's right. There's no requirement. These funds can be spent on several other things as well. So really, the states aren't being bribed to pass these laws, which is going to make it a whole lot easier for us to fight in the 31 states that don't have them, to fight these laws. And we should. We absolutely should. As well as challenging this law in court. And yes, we absolutely should. But is the red flag provision in here a whole bunch better than it would have been if you hadn't have complained, if you hadn't have made noise, if you hadn't have contacted your lawmakers? Oh yeah, it's a lot better than it could have been because of what you did. Then there's a boyfriend loophole. What did our opponents want? Well, they wanted even the most casual relationship to be considered a dating relationship. You know the person, you've been on one date, you're in a relationship. They wanted a lifetime prohibition for domestic violence under this expanded definition, just like it is if you're married to the person you committed domestic violence against. That's what they wanted. What did they get? Not much. Not much, not compared to what they wanted. They did get an expanded definition of domestic violence with some clear and some not so clear limits. That's the bad news about that not so clear part, because then the courts are going to be left to interpret that. That's not a good thing. But one good thing that's in the law is that your gun rights automatically get restored if you're convicted of misdemeanor domestic violence under this expanded definition where you're dating the person but not married to them. If you get convicted under this, you do not have a lifetime prohibition. 5 years after you finish your sentence, if you've not been convicted of another crime, you are automatically removed from NICS and you're eligible to purchase a firearm again. Is that what I would like? No. Is it a whole lot better than a lifetime prohibition? Absolutely. And it's not all they wanted. They are very disappointed about this, I'm sure. Then there's enhanced background checks under 21. Let's consider what our opponents wanted and what they've passed in some states. California and Florida come to mind. An outright ban on gun sales to 18 to 20-year-olds. Sadly, polling shows that 3 out of 4 Americans support this. It's easy to see why. They think, well, you can't drink until you're 21. You shouldn't be able to buy a gun. They're not thinking about the fact that there's no constitutional right to drink. There's a constitutional right to keep and bear arms. So it's not analogous. It's not the same thing. But they don't realize that. So there's a lot of public support for that. And yet, if they couldn't get that, they wanted a ban on assault weapon sales to 18 to 20-year-olds. Again, lots of public support. So what did they get? They got neither. They got neither of those things. What did they get? Well, they got the inclusion of juvenile records in the background check system. Now, we can talk about whether a background check system should exist at all. Whether the NICS check is unconstitutional. But if we're going to have background checks, does it make sense? Is it something we can defend that a 17-year-old can commit a felony and wait until he's 18, and the day he turns 18 he can buy a firearm, and that felony doesn't do anything? But if he were to commit that felony at 18 and tried to buy a gun at 19, he'd be denied under NICS. He'd fail a NICS check. I hate to say it, but that's going to be an extremely difficult position to defend. In fact, I would call it impossible to defend. So I think the inclusion of juvenile records in NICS is something that I can support as long as there's going to be a NICS system. My problem is with the 3-day and possibly 10-day waiting period that comes along with it. Although I understand why initially we need to have a 3 to 10 day waiting period, because juvenile records are frequently under seal, they're all over the place, they're not centralized in the same way that adult records are in many states. So it's going to take a while to get it all together and figure out how to get them into NICS. And I would rather have this law require them to be in NICS in 2 years. That's plenty of time to figure that out. Unfortunately, this law will last for 10 years. But here's the good news. These provisions of these enhanced checks for 18 to 20-year-olds expire in 10 years, just like the 1994 assault weapons ban. So, in 10 years, we can modify them. Maybe we can get rid of them. Maybe we can move them into NICS so that an 18-year-old can buy a gun just like a 65-year-old can. Just go into the gun store, pass a NICS check, you're done, you walk out the door. Now, the last thing I want to talk about are the changes in requirements for an FFL. And quite a few of the gun rights advocates that I watch on YouTube, who have many more subscribers than I do, those folks are very upset about this. And I understand them being skeptical and looking for how the other side's going to use this. But let's look at what our opponents wanted. They wanted all sales, including private sales and transfers, by which they mean I hand you a gun, even in my house. If we want to do that, we got to go down and get a NICS check. And then when you hand it back to me, you got to get a NICS check. That's the law right now in Washington State, believe it or not. You wonder why it's not being enforced? That's why. Well, failing that, they said, well, we want all private sales between strangers to go through an FFL. And that is the Joe Manchin plan. If I know you, I can sell you a gun. If I don't know you, I have to we got to go down to the gun store and get a NICS check. That was their next plan. If that failed, they wanted to require all sales at gun shows to go through a NICS check, because they are absolutely obsessed with gun shows, even though we know from the DOJ study released in January 2019 that virtually no crime guns are bought at gun shows. That's what they wanted. What did they get? Absolutely none of it. They didn't get any of those things. What did they get? Well, they got a change in the definition of being in the business of selling firearms. The current definition is with the principal objective of livelihood or profit. Now that's been changed to predominantly to earn a profit. There is no change, let me underline this, there is absolutely no change in the federal law allowing states to determine whether or not private sales between individuals require a background check. That law does not change. It's identical to the way it is now. In my home state here of Idaho, if I want to sell a gun to somebody, I just sell them the gun. No problem. Now, am I careful? Yeah, and you are too, because we know criminals don't get many guns that way. But should we worry about this change in definition? Some Second Amendment advocates say yes. However, I defer to the opinion of David Hardy, a Second Amendment attorney with decades, and I mean decades of experience, going back to the 1980s in Second Amendment law. and in firearms law. His opinion? This change in wording is completely useless. It changes absolutely nothing about the definition of being in the business of selling firearms and thus requiring an FFL. And I put his opinion up here. I had to edit it a little bit so I couldn't put the whole post on the screen. But you can see the relevant parts, and you're welcome to go to his page, Arms and the Law, and read the whole post. Should we be happy with this bill? Absolutely not. Did the other side get what they wanted? Not even close. And that was because of you. If you'd done nothing, we would be in a big mess right now. Thank you for what you did. Thank you. And if you haven't done anything, do it now. Do it now. Contact your lawmakers. Contact your senators. Contact your congressmen. Okay, that's all I have for you today. I'd love it if you would like, comment, subscribe, even if you didn't like what I said. Helps feed the algorithm. And I will hope to see you again soon in the next video. God bless, and bye-bye.